welcome to the Founders Talk series event organized by the IMB Field, the Incubation and Startup Hub of IIM Visakhapatnam. So, after starting operations in 2018, IMB Field is now one of the fastest growing incubators in India. We are located in Visakhapatnam, a smart city, an aspirational district, and an industrial hub and the proposed executive capital of state of Andhra Pradesh. So IMB Field would like to build the incubation center by leveraging the strengths of this region. So we are keen on promoting innovation and entrepreneurship by encouraging and supporting the students, faculty members, alumni of the institute, startups and entrepreneurs across the nation, and especially in this region to translate their ideas and concepts into business models and make their products or services ready for commercialization. So currently we have 4 flagship programs and we do a number of capacity building programs and our programs have received tremendous positive response as well. So Founders Talk series will be webinars wherein startup founders, entrepreneurs, and domain experts will share their insights and opinions on current business developments. And our goal is to bring together successful entrepreneurs to give talks and share their idea-focused experiences, foster learning, inspiration, and provoke conversations that matter. So for the first episode of Founders Talk series event, we have Mr. Amit Kumar Agrawal to discuss about his experiences as an entrepreneur with a focus on raising capital for startups. So Mr. Amit is an IIM Ahmedabad and IIT Kanpur alumnus and is the CEO and founder of NoBroker.com, who recently became a unicorn last week. He has 10 plus years of experience in banking and financial services consulting in the areas of business portfolio strategy, entry stage formulation, sales productivity enhancement, etc. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation to speak on our event. And now I invite Mr. Amit to take over the stage and impart us with knowledge.
Thank you very much. Can I see the participants on the video? No, I can't see.
Sir, we have organized it in webinar mode, so you can see only the panelists.
Sure, no problem. So what is it? How is it that it would benefit you? I would want to keep it more interactive because there is no point in basically me talking about No Broker at length and telling the entire story, but without being able to answer the questions which really matter to you guys. My question is the audience IIM Visakhapatnam students or is the audience someone else?
So the audience is mostly the entrepreneurs at IMV Field, which is the incubation and startup hub of incubation center of IIM Visakhapatnam.
Sure. So
to intervene, Amit sir, good afternoon. I am Professor Sushil Kumar, and I am the area chair of entrepreneurship here at IIM Visakhapatnam. So I did my MBA from TISS Bombay in social entrepreneurship and PhD from IIM Raipur. I teach entrepreneurship and strategic management. And it's really, we are very, very happy to have you here to guide our students as well as the WSP team, because we have entrepreneurs and Harsha is there, then Professor Shamim and Veda Prasad. So it's really a nice opportunity. Your insights, your experience, which I always actually try to tell to the students in the class, will really guide us. Sure. Therefore, we really love to hear to you and have a lot of interactions. And first of all, congratulations to you because of your achievement. You all have made a great name.
Thank you.
So thank you once again. And yes, you can continue.
Thank you, Sushil. So what I would do, I would in perhaps 10-12 minutes, I would try to cover the journey that I have had. And then I will open the floor for questions and then we can take it from there. So broadly, so I am basically as Veda Prasad just mentioned that I'm an engineer from IIT Kanpur and an MBA from Ahmedabad. I worked in management consulting for almost 10 years. And then I was heading strategy with ANZ Bank. And then I think when I was basically in my mid-30s, I realized that the life has become very comfortable because ANZ Bank is a foreign bank. It's a New Zealand bank based out of Bombay. They do mainly corporate banking. And I started feeling that I have basically come into an orbit in which you are into a comfortable corporate job, which gives you good salary, and there is not much of a challenge going forward. And And I felt that this is the time to basically take risk, because if I don't do something now and take risk, then it will be, then the years, as years pass by, it will be even more and more difficult. So that was my thought process. And at that point of time, we were expecting a kid. My wife is my batchmate from IIT Kanpur, and she wanted to take a break, but because I started to do my startup, so she had to continue with her job. So me and two of my friends, Akhil and Saurabh. Saurabh is my batchmate from Ahmedabad, and Akhil is junior from IT. So we three started No Broker. The concept of No Broker is as follows: that we basically, what we felt was, as a customer, that why should I pay such a huge amount of brokerage to a broker? Finally, what a broker is doing is connecting a owner with a tenant, with a buyer, with a seller. And in this world of technology, why can't I basically two people be connected with each other on a platform? Why do I need to pay a physical broker such a huge amount of money? So brokers typically charge 1 month of brokerage. They charge 2% while selling and buying property each. So we felt that why can't technology solve this problem? So we started nobroker.com. We basically started a little bit of marketing. We did not have enough money. I had left my job. So I was not earning. And since we had started investing in marketing, so we were spending money also. So the cash depletes faster. And for many of the students who have taken education loan, they know the feeling. And so what basically, when we started meeting investors, the feedback which investors gave us, or the question which they asked us, was that why is there a no brokerage company somewhere else in the world which has become large, like US or China? And the answer is that there is no other company in US or China which is large in non-brokerage. Everywhere else in the world, people have companies which are broker classified, where like 910 acres, Magic Bricks, and so on, where the broker is there and the customer is there, but owners are not there. And then you end up paying the entire month of brokerage. So we basically said that, so investors asked us as to why, because Veda just said that, yeah, I need to cover the fundraising process, so I am covering that. So when we went to meet investors, the thing which investors looks uh, most importantly is the market size. Is the market size very big or not? So the market size is big for real estate, but the question was that this differentiation, if this differentiation is really so important, then why hasn't a US or Chinese company already done that? Our answer was that perhaps the broker in US are much more rule bound, educated, law bound, which Indian brokers are not, because even a grocery shop guy acts as a broker in the meantime. So we started basically meeting more and more investors. Customers started coming on the platform. They wanted to save brokerage. So more and more customers starting the platform. Even when we were spending very little bit of money, more and more customers started using the platform, and the traction started growing. And then was a time when basically SAF Partners, which is now called as Elevation Partners, they basically gave us around $3 million, around 18 crores at that point of time. And then we opened till then I used to work from home and there was no office. That was a time when we basically opened the office for the first time and started basically building the team. Over the years, earlier, if you remember, there's a company called housing.com with very good founder, but because of some unfortunate events, the company didn't work out. So when they had raised huge amount of money, then there was a huge problem in our fundraising, that when another player has raised so much money, then how can you compete in this market? When the other company folded up, then there was another question, that why have they not succeeded? So can you really succeed? We don't know what other companies are doing. We can only think about what we are doing. So we continued focus on saving money for customers. So on No Broker, as an owner, you can come and post your property. As a tenant, as a buyer, you can contact that owner directly. We make money through value-added services. So you need a specific service, then we charge money. You need packers, movers, painting, cleaning, home interiors, then we basically have those value-added services, and then we make money from there. So across years, this is year 2015. Then for the next 5-6, I think 4-5 years, we did not get much support from the Indian investors, because they were pretty scared after the housing.com, and they could see that not many real estate companies are doing well or have done well in online real estate. So nobody in India was funding us. We kept on building our business, kept more and more customers started liking us, and we somehow struggled, but we somehow managed to raise funds from small investors in Singapore, Japan, South Korea, and so on, which we basically did, and then we survived. And as the business kept on building, finally, I think in year 2019, the bigger investors basically also noticed what customers are noticing, and then they basically gave us. We had multiple rounds of funding, and we raised money from Tiger Global and General Atlantic. So we raised around $130 million at that point of time, which is around 1,000 crores. And recently, basically just I would say a couple of weeks back, we have raised around $210 million, which is around 1,600 crores from Tiger Global, General Atlantic, and a new investor called Moore Strategic Ventures. So across 7 years, starting, what summary basically is that we built a company on a concept which was a very Indian concept. The problem of broker is a very Indian problem. It is not a problem which is basically not necessarily a global problem. I'm not aware about it. Something which is not copied from West, something which is, so we are not a Uber or Amazon equivalent in India. And we just focus on basic fundamentals. We remained frugal. We have always respected money that we have raised. We have built a good team. So from a stage 6-7 years back, where we used to get 2,000 customers in a month or 3,000 customers in a month and 1,000 properties uh, in a month, today we add 5 lakh new customers per month, 220,000 new properties per month. Our cumulative, we add 0.6 crore new customers per year. Our cumulative customer base is 1.6 crore. Our employee strength is around 2,500 people across many cities. We have till now we have raised around 3,600 crore of funding from investors across the globe. So huge amount of I would say confidence by global investors in what we are doing. And after, I know that unicorn and $1 billion valuation is something which is celebrated a lot by the media, but I think what really matters is to build a genuinely good business which customer loves, which customer come back to. That is much more important than valuation, and that is what basically we aim to do in the coming years. And the objective is to be not only India's largest player in terms of core real estate of rental and buy and sell, but also be very large player in painting, cleaning, packers, movers, home interiors, all the home ancillary services, and also the related financial services. So this is basically a quick introduction from my side. Happy to handle any questions that you guys might have.
Yes, sir, there is one question from Chaitanya. So can you see that?
Yeah. So the question is that, can you please elaborate on how the VAS works? Is it on advertising? So the value-added services are not on advertising. We don't make any revenue from advertising. In our context, it might be irritant to the customer and not a good customer experience. So what we do is, for example, in case of packers and movers, we tell the customer that we have done tie-ups with packers and movers in the background. Customer can come on our website and basically check the prices which are there. So our software displays the, you want to move from point A to point B. So we will our product will quote you a price. And once you pay for that, then we'll connect you with our vendor partner. We will have a phone movement manager, which will make sure that your experience is good. So while the truck work, while the labor work is being done by the vendor partner, we collect the money and we are responsible for the customer experience. So that's how it works. Should I take the next question?
Yes. Yeah, Poonam, you can ask a question as you have raised your hand.
Hi, Amit. I was so looking forward to this session with you. Mine is a startup called Organic Amrit. We have a website just about to launch, organicamrit.com. It's an aggregation mode for eco-positive and organic products. Now, the thing that I want to ask you is more from a startup point of view, because I'm standing there, and that's the evolutionary status I'm in. How and what were the challenges initially when you were, onboarding? In my case, it'll be suppliers, but in your case, properties, right? So just macro level understanding of the basic challenges that you face, and how did you sort of go about promoting your credibility? How did you establish your credibility? Because now we're at that go-to market stage, branding, credibility, and these are the aspects that we really want to focus on. Ours is anyway organic, it's niche. So, and we are aggregating the brands, and irrespective of the stature they hold, anybody doing any good work in the eco sustainability space in the country, we want to promote them, right? So just
Sure.
guide me on that bit of it.
No, sure, that makes sense. This is a good question, and this is a typical chicken egg problem, that you want to work with suppliers / owners. You want to get them on a platform, but they will not get on the platform unless they start seeing a lot of traction on their supply. And how do you but then you need to get the buyers or the tenants in our case to interact with
Amit,
them.
sorry, let me barge there. Thankfully, with God's blessings, we got a lot of support from the brands. We have some of the biggest brands on board. Abhi business shuru nahi hua. Luckily, we were part of incubation program, NSR cell ka program tha. It's 10,600 ventures, and we were at just the top 20 ventures. So our journey was good. Plan was good. So people really understood our mission and our adherence to the mission. तो वो प्रॉब्लम नहीं हुई. तो ब्रांड तो हमें बहुत अच्छा रिस्पांस मिल रहा है. मेरा क्रेडिबिलिटी एस्पेक्ट कस्टमर से ज्यादा हो जाएगा, बिकॉज वहां पे चैलेंजेस अभी हम लोगों ने ऑब्वियसली सॉफ्ट लॉन्च किया था, तो फॉर्मल लॉन्च अभी ड्यू है. सो व्हाट डू यू थिंक एंड एडवाइज अस initially, what are the key things that must take care for customer acquisitions and go to market?
So I think my answer would be more in my context, and then you will have to translate it for your context.
Got it. Yeah, no problem.
So in my context, the way in which I would like to summarize my learnings was that my key learning would be only one, and that is that make sure that you take a city, a target, a segment which is small to begin with. The reason why
Mumbai is my market. Mumbai is my market. So that we've done.
Yes.
We just boiled it down to just Mumbai for now.
Yeah, that's it. I think apart from that, there is no other shortcut. You basically
Achha.
need to get into the ground, need to basically start building, and make
Okay.
sure that every customer, on both the sides, be it brand, be it customer, is happy with what you are providing. There is,
Okay.
apart from elbow grease, there is no other shortcut. The typical
So social
mistake
media,
many
the
people make
promotions
is that they basically take too big a market. So they take multiple cities and then they are spreading
Right.
themselves too thin. If you have not done that, then you're on the right path.
No, I'm not doing that. Surely, consciously, we were very clear. We only want to attend to Mumbai for now, if need be, for the next 5 years, because we want to also go digital. But the only thing is, initially when you started out, what really worked for you? Did the social media advertisement work for you, or was it word of mouth? Did you go through warm circles? What was your trigger point that catapulted into lots of customers eventually, of course?
So there was nothing which catapulted us to a lot of customers. So there was no shortcut that we could get. Unfortunately, what we did was we basically, of course, we did some Google ads to get some tenants. But the problem in our business is there are two sides of the business. One is the demand, which is tenants and buyers.
Right.
And another side is basically property owners. And
Right.
you can
Same
get
here. We're the
you
same.
can get the tenants and demand in our case through digital advertisement, which we did, which is the easy way. Of course, you need to spend some money, but you put some CPC, you get some customers. Our struggle more was how to get owners, because for property owners, which doesn't seem to struggle to be yours in your case, but in our case, the struggle was that getting property owners was much difficult because they are aged and no one goes to Google and says, I want to rent my property.
Right.
They say that I want to take a property in Koramangala, but nobody types Google how to sell a property in Koramangala. So getting those customers were difficult for the initial 1 year without fundraise, and we just kept on chugging along. We basically initial adopters in India basically help. They are much more forgiving. There are always some people on both sides of the curve who are
Right.
much more forgiving, who are much more friendly towards a new concept, and that's our best bet.
So money wise, just give me a little understanding of how much I'm bootstrapped, right? So the questions are coming all from the fact that hands are tied up. So promotion perspective, say how much do you think one must, did you outsource your marketing first of all?
No, no.
And second, how much budgets did you keep initially? Because initial traction takes time. Did you go do it over sustained period of time with a certain amount allocated to it? How did you go about it?
So we basically did the opposite. We basically had this in my mind. So I could sustain myself for 2 years without any salary.
Wow, that's so cool.
So I basically gathered that, and then I said that okay, I can sustain myself without 2 years without salary. But if I start putting money into marketing, then this 2 year
Mhm.
reduces to 1 year. So we said, okay, this much
Right.
money we have 1 year, divide by 12 and start spending that money per month.
Got it. Got it. I got it. Got your approach. I think that's exactly what I'll have to do as well. There's no other choice. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chaitanya, you can go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. First of all, Amit, congrats on the unicorn status.
Thank you.
I have actually a couple of questions. Somewhere these two are interconnected. The first thing is nobroker.com bottom line positive? Or if not, when do you expect it to be positive?
So in the middle couple of years back, we had started, we became on a variable cost basis, we became positive in Bangalore and Mumbai, which are larger cities.
Sure.
But what we realize is that you need to decide what journey you want to take. If the journey is to basically, if the market is limited in size, that makes sense to run over profitability faster. But in our case, the market is very big. Roti Kapda Makan are basically the 3 largest anyway industries in any country. And we are barely into a couple of cities. And I'm sure that many of the people in this audience also would not have ever used NoBroker. So there's a huge amount of growth opportunity which is there. So when we make money from some service, we want to quickly invest into other services. For example, when we started, whenever you start a subsegment of the business in the initial year, 2 year, you spend more to build it, and then basically starts getting towards break even. And when it's getting towards break even, then we launch something more. We launch some more city. So I don't think we would be chasing profitability for the next 2-3 years, because we will decide. We can't say that we will chase profitability and we'll chase growth. If the market was limited, then we would like to chase profitability, because then makes sense to be self-reliant faster. But given that the market is so huge, we don't want to take a risk that we start chasing profitability prematurely and we don't invest in the markets and businesses and cities where we can be leader. And then we leave that market to some other player who comes and conquers it. So, but having said this, there's also an important distinction to be made, whether we as a company, it's okay to say that, okay, we are going to chase profitability a couple of years later. But is there a path towards profitability, or are you just going to run a company which is just raising money and burning money and like there's no tomorrow? That is not the case. So it's very, very clear in our mind that what is the path towards profitability, which are the businesses which are giving us positive contribution, which are the ones which are giving negative contribution, when will they convert to be positive, how much is our corporate head cost, how much of business would basically nullify that cost. So that thing we have in mind, so that whenever we do any expense, any investment, we keep it in mind that it doesn't become so capital dependent that you can never come back to the profitability.
Sure. I think my second question is somewhere related to what we just spoke, but I'll anyway ask it. So what would be the investor's point of view when they know that, the startup is not going to be bottom line positive? I understand, it's a priority on whether you want to expand into the market when there is a huge market size. But what would be their point of view, let's say when you're at the seed stage or series A, that they don't see the bottom line positive in next 5 years or 8 years to come back, right? So what would be their point of view?
Yeah, I will be very honest here. When we used to talk to investors in our funding rounds, they wanted to see what is the path towards profitability. So if you So whenever we used to talk to them, they wanted to know. They wanted us to say that, okay, within 2 years, 3 years, you will be profitable. But when they invested in us, and this is a little funny, and when we started showing it to them in the board meetings that this is how we can be profitable and we are trying towards that, they did not like it at all. Because for investors, then this is a signal that the market is limited. Because then they feel that if the market is not limited, then if there's a lot of investment opportunities, a lot of growth opportunities, then how can these founders start thinking about profitability so prematurely? So while in every fundraise, in every investor conversation, which is around capital raise, they want to know whether founders think about profitability or not. And that's perhaps the so-called right answer to give in those conversations. But what I have seen personally is that if you are doing well as a company, investors right now nowadays believe that growth is much, much more important. And once a growth is secured, once competition is much, much lower than where you are, then it is much, much easier to extract profitability. For example, you can see in terms of Swiggy, Zomato, etc., that they could reduce their losses drastically in COVID because customers did not have any choice. There are only two players and they could charge the food delivery fees as they want. And similarly with Uber and Ola, them charging surge fees, etc. Yeah.
Sure. Sure. Just that since you brought the topic of Zomato, is there anything IPO coming up pretty soon?
No, I think we need to build a very large business because before we think that. But yes, one day, sure.
All right. Congrats on that, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chetan.
Yeah, Gopi, you can go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, hello. Okay, I think I'm audible.
Yes.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, I can see you. Maybe you may not be able to see me, but I can see you. It's wonderful to listen to you. And I think you gave a very good broad indicator about big investors look at customer base, and the prior kind of investors look at the energy and perhaps regulatory bodies awareness and all those things. My question to you is, with all this unicorn buzz and everything, media as well as so much of the startup ecosystem, including the IIMs, would be demanding your time. While the time from the media perhaps maybe rolled into some market presence and awareness, how are you seeing this load of Zooms and all the meetings from the startup ecosystem and the IIMs asking for your time, and how comfortable you feel at this juncture to share views and opinions on a range of so many other topics which may be in your domain or not, but all are eager to ask you each and every question. So how does this new exam feel for you?
No, so the way in which I look at it is that you might have, I'm not sure when is it that you had heard about NoBroker or about us, but for the past 7 years, even when we were very small, so let me basically just give an insight into how the journey has been. So this journey is basically filled up with, one is that there are only few people that you can share your doubts with, your questions with as a founder. There are only few people who can really relate to you, the type of challenges that you are facing. And what I have typically found is that in Indian startup ecosystem, there is a scarcity of people helping out each other actively. So somehow that culture, which is perhaps there in, even if you look at in terms of alumni in colleges, the way in which Harvard alumni help out each other. I don't think I am Ahmedabad or I am Visakhapatnam alumni that actively help out each other. In terms of donations, also the same thing is true. And I would say the similar thing is true for the Indian startup ecosystem. Founders helping each other is not something which is very prevalent, but I have always done both. So I basically, today I actively go and I reach out to founders who have made companies bigger than mine. I reach out to them, I ask them for their time. And similarly, the people who are in the smaller companies or in the starting range of their startup journey, I'm very happy to help them in any way, because you will be surprised that the reason for companies closing down are sometimes very simple. And had somebody told them that this should not be done, so much of hard burn could have been stopped. So it is not that I take too many of interviews or too many of media interactions. There's a spurt around funding and then it basically cools down. But any opportunity which I get to talk to fellow entrepreneurs, I try to entertain.
That's so wonderful to hear. It's like your life journey is in two axes entrepreneurial journey. One in your own growing your own enterprise, and the second axis is, as you mentioned, to develop that kind of a network of members talking to each other, hand holding. It's so wonderful. Cheers to you, and I am Vizag.
Thank you.
Keep on.
So there is one question from Brajesh Kumar. So he's asking how you planned 0 to 10 customer and a property listing. You mentioned expense on advertisement and marketing. How you executed these in initial days?
So see, getting some initial customers, so there was no specific trick, as I was basically just telling, I think Poonam also earlier, that the approach was to do whatever you can. So see, in the initial 10 customer, 100 customer, you do whatever is required. So let me give you a very, very crude example. Suppose if you're opening a online coaching, suppose, right, for education, for IT, suppose you're doing online coaching. I would suggest that in the initial days of the questions, how do I get students? How do I get customers? I would say go ahead and do something which is as crude as standing in front of a coach, physical coaching institute and handing out the pamphlets of your app to the students who are coming out of the door. Do things like that also. That's perfectly okay. Asking your friends to give it a try, being very shameless and asking friend of friends to give it a try. Don't think about scalability, whether this physically distributing pamphlets scalable or not. Nobody cares. You need to basically get the product off the ground and do everything, be it online marketing, Google, Facebook, asking friends, going on the street, anything is allowed. I think so. For example, in our case, many of the houses have this to let board or to rent board written there and with their phone number. So there would be a house, and in front of it on the gate, there will be a cardboard and it will say to rent or to let or to sale, and phone number would be written. There's the phone number of the owner who wants to rent or sell that property. We felt that this guy actually wants to avoid broker. That's why he's asking the passerbys to also come and he's happy to entertain them. So we used to click the photos of such boards. And then we used to go back to office and then call those phone numbers and say, hey, why don't you list on no broker your property? You can also rent and sell from there. Now, when you think about it, this is highly unscalable approach, highly crude approach. But so what? See, nobody in the initial few tens, hundreds of customers, you do whatever is required to get the ball rolling. Now, there is no secret per se, but I would suggest do anything in your power which is required.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is one more question from Aniket. So he's asking, for a two-sided marketplace like yours, how do you pick the first side to chase and build base, or do you go for both together? And secondly, how do you decide which side to be monetized and which side to be subsidized?
I think this is a very good question. So you can't choose which side to chase. You need to chase both the sides, right? Because any one side is coming there to chase the other side, right? So for example, if there is a dating app or is there a, then you have to chase boys also and girls also. Yeah, it is possible in Indian context that the girls might be lesser on the app and boys might be more. So you will have to put your more effort for getting girl customers there. Similarly, in our case, property owners are aged and they are lesser online friendly. So the effort to get them is more. To get tenants who are younger and digital friendly, the effort is a little lesser. But you need to get to them both. So that is one. Second one is a very interesting question, which is which one to monetize more. And I think we have also learned this a little hard way. When we started, we thought that tenants are younger and it is much going to be easier to charge them. And we used to charge tenants. Then later we started charging owners also. I'm not saying is the platform still free, but for validated services, edition, etc., we used to start charging owners also. Over time, what we realize is that it is much easier to charge owners. So today now our strategy is more towards, okay, let's charge owners, let's not push tenants first. Same thing is being done by, I would say, many of the cars, used cars companies, Cars 24, Spinny, so many good car companies, used car companies are there. They're also realizing that charging the owner, focusing on the owner makes sense. So I'll give you the answer why. So I'm not saying in every two-side market you should charge the owner. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the logic of that. So the logic is as follows. If you are a car, if I'm between a car buyer and car seller, the common sense says that car buyer charge the car buyer because he's the one who's going to basically pay money, so he can pay something to you. But think about it for a moment that who's more desperate? The car seller is more desperate. Why? Because either he has already sold his car and either he has already bought a new car and his new car is sitting in the parking, and now he doesn't have parking for two cars and he wants to quickly get rid of this extra car that he has, old car that he has. Or he is flying to some other city or some other country and the date is approaching and you want to quickly get rid of this car. That's when typically you will sell your car, right? So he has a financial incentive to get rid of the car. Similarly, in the case of owners and tenants, owner is the one who is going to lose money for every day that the property is vacant. Tenant can say, "अच्छा ठीक है, चलो बाद में, अभी घर नहीं choose करा, बाद में करना." So what we are realizing is that okay, we should focus on owners for charging, and that's what we are doing. But this answer changes for everybody. My general suggestion would be, don't be too greedy in terms of charging both sides. Decide that which side basically makes money. For example, Airbnb, the property owner who is giving his property makes money. So Airbnb charges them much more than what they charge the guest. So that's the broad logic.
Yeah, okay. So there are a couple of more questions, but before that, can we move on to the raising capital part and then we come back to the questions, if it is okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
So what do you want to ask in raising capital?
So any tips, tricks or hacks that you can provide? So after that, the entrepreneurs will ask their questions.
Sure. So see, raising capital remains to be one of the most tricky parts of the entire journey, because once you have the ammunition, many times you feel that yes, that ammunition can be used to expand and so on. I would say that in our own journey, we have seen both the phases. We have seen the phases in which nobody wanted to touch us, nobody wanted to fund us. And we've also seen the phase finally after many years when the money that we wanted to raise was lesser and the people who wanted to fund us were much more. So that feeling also, fortunately, I've been able to see. And I would say that there are 2-3 things here which are very important. One is that I would say, in terms of the things, see, when you present to an investor, what is the investor looking at? Investor looking at 3-4 things. One, what is the problem that you're solving? What's the solution? How big is the market? What is the traction in the solution that you have proposed? And what is the quality of the founders? These are 5 things that generally investors look at. Now, out of the 5 things, the thing which is most important is market size. This is the most important thing that the investor looks at. If the founder is little less good, it's still okay. If the differentiation is not that great, it can still be built. But if the market size is small, then everything is lost. So for people who are trying to raise institutional money, market size is the key. Please make sure that in your discussion, you make sure that you are able to prove to the investor that the market size is huge. So that's the first thing. If the market size is huge, you can figure something out. Otherwise, the structural problem remains with you. Second thing is about storytelling. So many of the successful entrepreneurs which are there, they are very good in terms of telling the story. What do I mean by story? What I mean by story is that you can't basically go there and say, hey, I am making this, I am selling this, and I'm here. This much is my traction and I need money for marketing. That's not how it works, right? You can't say that this was the problem and I'm basically selling this product, etc. So I need so many dollars because my expense is going to be this much. You have to paint the future that you are thinking and articulate it well to the investor. You need to be able to articulate to investor that the problem that you are solving is a right problem. Customers are excited about it. There are initial signs that customers are excited about this problem getting solved. And the market is so big that if you are able to continue on this path, this company is going to become very big. and the investor would miss that opportunity unless they invest in you. That's the main concept, right? Well, why would an investor invest in you unless you are able to articulate how his money is going to get huge amount of return, because you are going to make this a very, very large company. So that is the main objective which needs to be basically set. So second is articulation. And the third thing which I would say is a huge amount of perseverance or persistence. So in our case, basically, I think when we were raising Series A, we must have been rejected by some 20 investors, if not more. And when 19 investors, and the process of getting rejected, etc., is also very longish and painful. So you write an email, we wrote cold call emails to investors. Some of them replied, some of them didn't reply. So what typically I suggest is that there is a software called Mail Track, which you can put it in a Gmail, and it tracks whether the recipient has read the email or not. And it's a good software because then you know whether actually your mail was read or not. Second thing, you should remember that people read emails on mobile phones, which is small screen. So don't write too much. Write only 4-5 lines. Problem, solution, market size, traction that you're generating, and quality of the founders, pedigree of the founder. That's it. And just don't send PPTs. Just tell this is what you are doing. Ask for time. If they're interested, they will reply. So we basically and so you send the cold call email, some of them reply, then you have a first phone call. That call, or it can be a face-to-face call. For that, you need to spend money and fly and go to their office. Sometimes it's just a junior guy who's meeting you. So he may just stop there. Or if he likes you, then you move to the next level where a principal basically meets you. If he likes, then he will call a partner. And if the partner likes, then only he will take that entire thing to the investment committee meeting. And hence there are drops at every stages. So when 19 meetings have basically failed and 19 investors have said no to you, which involved multiple meeting with some of the investors, and when you are sitting in the 20th meeting, then you are very, very tired, right? Because you're not earning money, your friends are doing job, you are not sure what's your money, you are running out of money, you're having self-doubt whether this is the right idea, whether I should pursue it or not. And uh, not sure whether how jittery or how panicky your co-founder is. You are even thinking about the money that you spent on the flight to get to this meeting, and many a times you are just bored of telling your story 19 times with no result, and you just want to leave that meeting, go home and sleep. But in the 20th meeting also, you need to show the same confidence, same passion, and present your case, present your story with full enthusiasm, because that's what the investor is looking at, and you can't compromise with it. So if you need to fake it, you have to fake it, but show passion continuously and keep on basically trying, and you have to persevere. So there is no option to that. I think so. That's one of the learning that we have had. And then finally, it's all about how your business is doing. So that is anyway the core. Apart from the persistence, perseverance, your way to reach customers, or about your storytelling, at the end of the day, it is about the core of your business. If you keep on putting time on it, keep on improving on it, many a times, which is basically the second stage of ours, that okay, in the first stage we got some funds, but in the second stage people did not touch us because of some external reason, but we kept on surviving. So the important thing is to survive. You keep on surviving, don't close down, because then if you are keep on doing little bit better and better, then there's a good chance that somebody someday will notice you, because you are helping customers, which is what basically investors started noticing in our case. Having said that, it is much more difficult than studies, because there is no right answer, there's no wrong answer. There's a lot of factor of luck which is there. Many people like me come and say that persistence and patience is important, but the opposite is also true. If your idea is not good, you don't know it is not good, but everybody is saying it is not good. All the investors are rejecting you. Perhaps it's a time, there comes a time when you should just stop chasing that idea of yours. Why should you uh, damage your career behind one idea which nobody is liking, or whose time has not come? So what I did was that I basically drew a line. I said, okay, I have money to spend in business only till 1 year or 2 years. So that's my outer limit. The moment I touch that limit, I'm going to join a job back. So while you are in the fighting for fundraise and focus on your customers, try to be a better storyteller than you were in the previous meeting. Observe the objections and the question that investors are asking. Include that in your pitch from next time onwards. Ensure that your passion shows up, passion for the idea shows up, visually shows up in the meeting, because investor needs to know that you are excited about the idea. And also, but have persistence, have perseverance, but also draw a line to say quits. There's nothing wrong to say that I quit. What's wrong about that? You can't just basically give your premium years, your golden years, chasing an idea which is not working out or whose time has not come. So there should be a quitting time also, that okay, that this thing comes, I'll quit. Yeah, that's all from my side.
Yeah, that was very much insightful. So we can take up some more questions that we had left out earlier. So there was one.
I don't think I'll be able to continue till 5:30. I think I'll have to leave much earlier than that. So yeah.
Yes, we can stop at around 4:05 or 4:10.
No, I'm okay to handle 20 minutes more. So
Okay.
around 4:15 or 4:30 is when we can stop.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so there was one basic question from a student. So she is he or she is in class 12, and he is asking, like, how do we validate our startup idea? May I know the first steps to be taken towards that idea?
Yeah, the first step is to basically ask your potential customers. So people who think will take your product, will take your service, ask them. Ask your friends, ask friend of friends, ask strangers. So even when the investor says no to you, I think what we used to do is we used to go back to customer and ask them, do you still like the product? Do you like the product? Do you like the service? Will you pay for the service? If their answer is yes, then perhaps it gives you more motivation, more reason to continue. But to answer your question, first of all, it's amazing to say that at such a young age you want to start something of your own. It's a very good sign. You should continue that. Ask customers, ask all the potential customers, ask your friends, ask friend of friends, ask strangers.
Yeah, okay. So one more question from Raj Lakshmi. So how to approach a market while starting a tech-based company like yours? And how can we get our initial customers if we are launching a product in the technology space?
So see, getting customer, as I said, has multiple ways. One is doing advertisement, which is digital. So if you can do Google advertisement, if you can do Facebook advertisement, please go ahead and do it. If you can tap into your friends network, your friend of friends, anyone who can basically use a service, ask them to use a service. Ask them to download the app, ask them to use the website, ask them to buy the product, whichever thing is there. And if there's any hacks that you can think of, for example, one of the hack that we thought of was to click a photo of a toilet board, or say to give a pamphlet. So I'm saying or just to basically put an umbrella, put a canopy and sit in front of a mall or in front of a school or in front of a society, do anything. I'm saying any hack that you can think of by which you can see, approach or meet your customers directly, either through internet or through physical world. Just do that. Now those hacks you need to think. That's where the innovation of a founder comes into the picture. How can you think of a hack to basically reach out to those customers at a very low cost?
Okay. Next question from Gopi. Any method or ritual you followed for coming back to the table when one investor rejected? What was the mindset at the 20th rejection, and what was the keeping up spirits or the support base that you had, if you can say?
Yeah, I think because we thought that we are going to chase this for say a year or 2 years, so there was no coming back. And of course, having co-founders help, because then you can talk to each other and you can you can blow off the steam. But it is always difficult. Even today, if an investor says no, another investor says no, and then going to a third meeting is always painful, because then as a human it starts affecting you, right, and your confidence and your spirit. But this is something which we have to do, and I'm telling you, as the company becomes bigger, the number of employees become bigger, this is the burden that we as a founder always carry, that we need to talk to investors, we need to raise funds, and we need to take that stress. There is no way out, and this is our duty. This has to be handled by us. And what basically I thought in the initial years was that I have to keep on trying. And the earlier question, which was that what do you do when an investor rejects? How do you get back? It gets a bit difficult. I think the only thing which we used to do was that we used to update that investor if something changes, and just find out why they have rejected you. Is it because they don't believe in the concept? They think their traction is lower? They think the market is smaller? So what is their rejection? They might not say the rejection out loud. Then ask them for the reason. Ask them for a feedback, and then try to resolve it. For example, if the investor says, no, we don't think the market is bigger, go and do more research. Perhaps your initial calculation was incorrect. Find out more sources. Find out if there's government source, find out if there's internet source, make some estimations, make some assumptions, prepare an Excel sheet, project what do you think is going to be the market size. Somebody says that no, the traction is too low, then give a fight, get more customers, try to generate traction. So whatever is it that is making investor uncomfortable, I would say attack on that problem and then go back to the investor, because then just sending regular update doesn't work unless the core problem gets solved.
Yeah, sure. So there is one very relevant question from Sarmishta Majumdar, which every startup like faces nowadays. So she's asking, considering we have limited fuel to run, where should we focus and invest more? That is, the options are to develop full-blown product, or to focus on digital marketing, or to focus on the public relations, or hiring employees.
See, I think the objective, think about what will make you most comfortable. Full blown product, I think, can never be made. After 7 years, also we think our product is not fully made. So full blown product is a mirage. Don't chase it. Your objective is to make a minimum viable product, which works and which provides customer that service to some extent, not full extent. And PR, I don't think helps too much at a very initial stage, but if you know some journalists, then please go ahead. Hiring, of course, helps if that is what can make your business better. I would say if I were you, I would basically take a small geography, small customer segment, small target segment, so that my focus can be sharper. Otherwise, I will be spending on marketing across cities, across segments, and I will be very shallow in my depth. Uh, so I would suggest that try to just make a product which works and test it in the market quickly. What if customers hate it? Who knows? You might think it's a great idea, but what if customers hate it? Then you need time to modify the idea, change the idea to suit customers. If you just keep on working on the product till the end and then you launch it, it might be too late. You might have made too much of an investment. To optimize your marketing, I would suggest take a niche first, either geography niche or customer niche, and try to crack that first. PR is not that effective. I think your numbers can speak for yourself. Hiring is, of course, dependent upon your need. You shouldn't hire because it's good to hire. You should hire only when it is a must to hire.
Yes, sure. So there is one more question from Rupali. So she is asking when to quit and how to know if is it the idea that is before its time, or the solution fit is wrong, or that the idea itself is bad or wrong target. So how to know?
You see, I think the customer basically has the answer. You should ask customer two questions. Will you use this product or service? And will you pay for this product or service? So if the answer is yes, then I think you keep on trying, because then I think there's much more strong case. But if the customer say, no, I will not use this product, something else is there which is good, or they say that, no, I may use this product, but only for free, otherwise I will not pay, then there's a serious problem. Or third, which you have not mentioned, but I still would like to mention, is that in case you feel that product is fine, customer can pay for it, but the market size is small. In that case, I suggest don't raise fund, just chase that small market, make it a profitable company and run it. Why does everybody need to raise fund? Why can't we basically build companies which are smaller in size but are profitable? So let's not assume that for every business fund needs to be raised, and every business need not be a large multi-billion-dollar business. There are so many businesses which are good, small, profitable businesses that solve customer problems. So you can basically chase that also. But yeah, so these are 2, 3 things that I would suggest. You decide whether to raise fund or not, or whether to quit or keep trying.
Okay, sure. So there is one question from Ganesh. So he's asking, can you explain after ideation stage how you enter the next level, and can you explain the level by level grow up? Like,
Yeah, so when we thought about the idea of non-brokerage, first of all, we spoke to customers. We spoke to potential customers and asked them whether if we provide such a service, will they like it? And customer said yes, they will like it. So one is checking the ideation stage by bouncing your ideas with genuine customers, not your friends, not just your friend, because your friends might be too nice to say things or might be too blunt to say things. I think you should ask strangers also. So one is that. Second thing, so ideation, then comes checking the ideation with other people, and then comes the stage of making a minimum viable product. Minimum viable product or MVP is something which basically is the minimal product that is required, which can test your idea. So make that minimum viable product, test that idea with the customers, and then see whether you need to raise fund or it can be a profitable venture on your own, and then basically take the path accordingly.
yeah, okay. One more question from Brajesh. So he's asking how to plan the ESOPs for initial hires, and how to plan how much to divest for the said investment amount, and is there any standards for divesting stakes?
So this is a good question and this is a tricky question. I would suggest that typically companies keep 10% or maximum 15% of their overall equity for ESOP. And I would suggest that if suppose you keep 10% uh, as the equity that you want to give in the ESOP, then I would suggest that you basically spread it across 5 years. In the first year, if possible, do not give more than 2 to 3% of your equity as an ESOP. Don't give it, because the same thing has happened with us. When we started giving a lot of ESOPs because we are very happy. We felt that the people are amazing and they should be given lots of ESOPs. But when the company started becoming bigger, even better and better people started joining. Then we started realizing that the people who at one point of time seemed to be amazing couldn't scale up. As the company was scaling up, they couldn't scale in the same proportion. And then we ended up giving too many ESOPs to the early employees who couldn't scale up, which basically made us have lesser ESOPs for the employees who were better and who came later. So then we had to course correct and so on and so forth. But I would suggest that the rule of thumb which I would give you is that make a ESOP pool 10%, 15%. Try not to give more than 1/5 of your ESOP pool in the first year.
Okay. I think
And you can always tell the people that in the second year you will allocate them more, but don't go out of the way to just allocate lots of ESOPs too early, too fast. That's all.
okay. So I think this is the last question from Aniket. What will be your best advice on hiring the right talent or finding the right co-founders, especially in times where salaries are sky high and unaffordable for early stage startups?
So, sorry, can you just tell me the question once again?
So what is the best advice that you can give for hiring the best talents, like in this time where the salaries are sky high and it is unaffordable for the early stage
Yes,
startups?
and the co-founder. So see,
Yeah.
the answers are a little separate. For co-founder, I would suggest that you find people who are friends with you. It's an odd advice, but that's how I'll say it. I have seen many founders finding their partners who are skill based. So I know marketing, let me take a guy who knows technology. There's a good approach, but unless you are friends with that guy, it's very difficult. So I've seen many companies disintegrating because the founders couldn't get along, because they did not have any friendship to begin with. So starting a company is anyway very lonely game. You should be able to shout at your co-founder. He should be able to yell back at you, and should be able to argue over things and then confide in each other and share the problems and share the excitement of things going well. So I would say co-founder is basically like a marriage, and hence find person whom you are comfortable with personally. Even if the skill set doesn't match fully than what you require, that skill set can still be built. So that's with respect to the founders, co-founders. Finding employees is much tougher. Not much tougher, but has a different ball game towards it. The initial people can be classified into two categories: one, important roles, and second, sort of dispensable role. For example, any guy who is basically making phone calls, or is a customer facing guy, or doing a job which is more of a routine job, you basically hire whomever you are getting, because the higher attrition in that layer and you can get someone else. But as far as the top people are concerned, or the important people are concerned, people who are taking care of your technology, your business, people whose value contribution is unique, is not dispensable, is not a commodity. For those people, you need to get those people who believe in you, who believe in the concept, because otherwise just spending money getting anybody from the market has a risk that they may leave after a few months, which you might anyway have to do. But if possible, try to get initial employees through referrals, a friend of a friend, or a junior in your college, or somebody that you have heard about, somebody who will who will perhaps align with you in terms of culture. So that's ideal. If you're not getting that, then of course you need to hire from market. And yes, in technology nowadays it's very difficult. The attrition is very high. That problem we are also facing. Are we done?
Yes, sir. We are done. Thank you so much for this insightful session and answering around 25 to 30 questions of our fellow entrepreneurs. So some of the learnings that we can take from this session includes, like while raising capital, we should approach the investors with the market size first, and the storytelling attitude, that is articulating to the investors, and the perseverance or patience and passion towards your idea should be very high. And others include, do not give away more ESOPs in the early stage of your company. And the most important one, after rejections by the investors, we can go back and ask questions so that we can improve when we come again. So thank you so much for this wonderful learnings, and we had a great time with you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys, for having me. Thank you, IMBS Letter Program. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.